Divorce. Most of us know someone who has gone through it. Maybe you have yourself. Gray divorce, older people ending their long-term marriage, is on the rise. No matter who starts the proceedings or when they start them, it's a difficult, stressful time and all parties need support. My guest today is one of those support people. Andra Davidson is a divorce coach. She isn't going to tell you whether you should or shouldn't. She's going to help you make it through as effectively as possible. Do I need to explain effectively? Maintaining your health and conscience. Taking the high road, that'll matter in the years to come. And minimizing conflict. She's specially trained in the collaborative approach, and as you listen to her, she sounds like someone you want to have on your team. I hope you appreciate her advice to you. Be kind to yourself. Listen now. It's pretty common knowledge that gray divorce is on the rise. There are a variety of reasons why people over 60 decide to divorce. Perhaps the most significant of which is the fact that the stigma around divorce has dropped drastically over the last several decades. And, more often than before, the divorce is initiated by the woman. Even if you are the driving force behind the decision, the actual process can be stressful, emotional, and it can be isolating. My guest today is a certified divorce coach and mediator. She believes in minimizing conflict, communicating effectively, and prioritizing healthy co-parenting. All three of those sound healthy and effective to me. Andra is a realist, though, as her weekly newsletter is called Divorce is a Shit Sandwich. Andra Davidson, welcome to the Boomer Woman's podcast.
Thank you. So nice to be with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Before we get started, can we just clarify, do you work with people already in the process of divorce, or do you counsel on whether or not to divorce?
So that's a great question. I usually do not get involved in the should I or shouldn't I question.
Okay.
However, I do tend to work with a lot of people who have decided that they want to go forward with divorce, but haven't yet begun the formal process. So if people are confused about where to start, what that looks like, what they should be doing in advance, that's a place where I can be very helpful. But I think I get involved at the point where they've made the decision that they do want to move forward with a divorce.
Okay. Now, at one point in time, just because of my age, the story was that the fellow was having a midlife crisis. He'd bought a sports car and he dumped his wife for a younger woman.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see now? Does it still stand or has it changed?
Well, the variation on that is that the woman might have done something very similar, right? That she may have hit that midlife point and decided herself that, maybe not the sports car or the affair or both, but you never know, right? But I do think, to your point in the introduction, one thing I'm also seeing is the increased number of women who are choosing to move forward with separation and eventually divorce for various reasons. But um, the shame around it has subsided, which is a good thing. And sometimes people are feeling less pressure to stay together if they don't think that they are meant to be together anymore. There's a little bit greater comfort level in saying, okay, if this isn't working, then we aren't going to hold ourselves to this societal standard of staying together no matter what.
Okay, we'll just add in here that post-divorce, so this is not pre-divorce, post-divorce, I did buy a fun car and I bought a motorcycle. And
Awesome.
people would actually come to me and say, Agnes, are you having a midlife crisis? And I'm going, there is no crisis here.
Right.
I have bought
Maybe it's
myself a
just an
house. Yeah.
awakening,
Yeah.
right?
I'm just
Yeah.
having fun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And,
okay.
I actually think that is such a great example, Agnes, of one of the upsides of this process, right? There are upsides.
Yeah.
It is a difficult process. There is a reason I call my newsletter Divorce is a Shit Sandwich. And I do believe that if you are in an unhealthy or, unhappy relationship that you don't feel you can resolve for whatever reason and you choose to move forward with divorce, there are upsides on the other side of that, and everybody deserves a future that they love. I love that you found something that, you wanted to do and you went and pursued it. That's an example of a success story to me.
Whew, thank goodness for that. Early in our
I hope
marriage.
you see it that way.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Early in our marriage, I remember hearing that one out of a couple had gone and bought a brand new car without consulting the other. And I
Mm,
remember we sort of said like, holy crap, like that's a huge expenditure to not
mhm,
consult the other person with.
mhm.
And then when I did buy the fun car, it was like, I don't have to talk to anybody about this. And even today,
Right?
like my other women friends, we all say like, we don't have to consult about anything. This is fabulous. So
Yeah, for sure. I when I moved into my first house post divorce, and I'm putting things up and art and,
yeah,
choosing paint colors, and I remember having that same exact thought. I don't have to ask anybody if they like this, if this is the right place for this or that. I get to pick all these things, and it's a very empowering thing
yeah,
to make those decisions, however big or small, all on your own for the first time can be really amazing.
yeah. I remember taking one of my daughters and her friend down to, I was on a budget post divorce, taking them down to Value Village and saying, okay, we got to set up the house. Like, I don't have a lot. So if you pick it up, if it looks interesting, pick it up. If you can think of a purpose for it, put it in the buggy. So
How
we had a
fun. I
great
bet they
time.
loved being part of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we had a great time. So that was good fun. Now, an article in Forbes suggests that gray divorce often comes about because one or the other reaches a point of no return. So, whether it's financial dishonesty that comes to light and it's like the last straw, or a public display of extreme
Yeah.
discord. Do you agree with that, or is it sort of the final decision after a long, slow burn?
Um, You know, it's both,
Okay.
honestly.
Yeah.
It really is. There are so many examples that I see from all kinds of reasons. I have a client whose husband had been dealing with a porn addiction for years and years. She finally got to a point where she said, I'm not okay with this in my life anymore. And she waited till her kids got older. That's what she decided worked for her. But I have others who just also reached the point where, they hadn't been getting along. They were sort of tolerating each other. It was, in their words, more of a business kind of relationship, and decided that it was just not worth staying in that kind of a dynamic going forward. And that they really thought that, yes, the process is challenging and there will certainly be fallout, family, friends, all kinds of different societal issues, right? And that it was worth it. And they wanted to move forward. So I think that there's just so much room for people to make that decision depending on where they are. And again, I think it just goes back to exactly what you said, that people don't necessarily feel that societal pressure that they used to just stay married, even if it's not working or they're unhappy. They now feel a little bit less like they can't exist on their own. We don't feel like that anymore. Women can be on their own just fine and do great, right? We don't need another partner to tell us that we're valid, or, that we can get home loans anymore, right? Or car loans or any of those things. So, people are willing to go be on their own and actually travel on their own and enjoy it as they should.
I- I'm sorry. I'm going to clarify that you did say home loans or car loans. I, what I heard at first was hormones. And I'm going like,
Oh,
oh heck, we don't need to go
well,
shopping for those.
no, we sure don't. No, no, no. We got enough of that. No, you are correct. I
Yeah.
said home loans or car loans. Yes.
Yeah. Now, age has got to come into it. Like we're talking gray divorce here.
Yeah.
In our 60s, we become well aware of the fact that we have a finite number of years left. I remember
Yeah.
turning 60 and thinking, oh crap, this is the first time that I've hit one of those big markers and I have less time going forward than I have in the rear view.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And that's, is that what you see? Like a lot of people just say, like,
Yeah.
I'm just not going to spend the
Yeah.
next
How
20,
much
30,
time
40
do I
years like
have
this.
left and how do I want
Yeah,
to spend it? I want to
yeah,
maximize it, right? I want to
yeah,
squeeze every drop out of it. How am I going to do that? I'm not willing to sacrifice my joy, my potential. Maybe there's something I've always wanted to do that I don't feel like I
yeah,
have had the
yeah,
opportunity to do. Maybe they're not wanting to be a role model to young adult kids who
yeah,
are making their way in the world anymore. I know for me that was a big thing. My kids I have twins and they're 25 now, but it was a big reason for me to feel like I can do this on my own. Would I want them to be in a relationship that wasn't serving them? I wouldn't. I don't want to role model that. I want to show them that they can do anything.
yeah.
Um, and that felt empowering to me. It made me feel brave that I could do it because I wanted
Okay.
to show them that.
Well, I guess especially when you do go on to buy a home and make a home for them,
Yeah,
and you're really proactive about
yeah,
designing your life. And yeah, so that
yeah,
becomes a really good role model for the kids, that even after this dreadful thing that happens,
yeah,
you can recreate the person that is healthy and fun
yes.
and all those things. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the motivator I think about all the time, and I love the way that you just said designing your life. I just love that description. I think that's a really beautiful way to capture what the potential is for the upside, right? Because that's where I really love to get involved for my clients is to help them figure out that this isn't just we're going to head out there and hope for the best. We're going to
yeah,
design your life
yeah.
so that you maximize it. What can you get out of this? What steps can you take now to create the best possible landing for yourself going forward?
Okay, I'm going to let you keep talking because you're segueing into my next question is, what do
Mm,
you do as a divorce coach?
sure, yeah, great. So as a divorce coach, I work with people wherever they are in the process. I mentioned that sometimes people come to me before they've necessarily told their spouse. In some cases, they've filed or they're actually, in some cases, post divorce decree, but having some communication or co-parenting issues or just personal issues with being stuck in the relationship. So I support people through the emotional side of the process. Their lawyer is for the legal dissolution. There are financial team members who can help with all of the financial planning and all the components of, splitting assets. But I am really there to advocate for people, to be their cheerleader, to help them take this big, overwhelming mess, this shit sandwich, if you will, and turn it into smaller, more manageable, more bite sized pieces that they can handle with grace, with kindness toward themselves, and with a vision for how they want to come out on the other side. So that they do it with a lot of intention and therefore, hopefully, reduce conflict and create healthy co parenting to the extent possible and sometimes healthy co-parenting because I don't want people to hear that and say, oh my gosh, everybody can just kumbaya get along, right? I know that's not the case,
Yeah,
and I certainly don't mean it like that. Sometimes healthy co-parenting is no contact. Sometimes that's what's
yeah,
required, and that's healthy. So it's whatever is healthy for your particular situation, but to create those boundaries, to set them, to communicate with a lot of intention and the values for yourself that you want to be proud of when you look back on the time. Right? That's what's really the most important for me. People will say, well, my ex doesn't deserve for me to take the high road. People say that a lot to me when I say, how can we take the high road in this situation? And they'll say, well, he doesn't deserve the high road. He may not. That may be completely true. He may have done something that is egregious by any standard, but you deserve the high road for you. And what I want is for you to look back on this time and say, I showed up as the best version of myself as often as possible. So I don't have to look back with regrets and more grief and sadness. so that you set, I really love to set goals with my clients, to be very intentional about what you want to do during and after the process to help you, so that as the tough decisions come up, you can use those goals as a sounding board. As those decisions show up, you can say, does this help me meet my goals or not? And if it doesn't, the answer can be really simple if you let it.
You said taking the high road, and my one thought there was too, we were just talking about setting an example for the kids.
Yep.
I remember hearing one story where the fellow was determined. They'd been married for a couple of decades. He was determined she was going to get as little as possible. He was going
Mm.
to screw her out of as much as he could. And I remember saying to the friend who knew this couple, how do you face the kids? And say, oh, yeah, I managed to screw your mom out of just about
Right.
everything.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that presents such a challenge, right? It's a challenge for, he's got his own set of issues with that, in my opinion. He's going to have to, face the reality. One day those kids are going to be real unhappy when they figure out what happened. And if she can manage to take the high road, to not badmouth the other parent,
Mhm.
to stay high and say, it's still important that you have a relationship with your father, not because he deserves it, but because we know the research shows that kids need a relationship with both parents. They may figure out that their dad did some things that they're going to have to deal with down the road, made some really poor choices, hurt their mom, hurt them. But that's eventually, and I don't know what age these kids are, but that's eventually going to be an issue that they sort out. When she takes the high road, what she does for them is become the safe place for them, so that they don't have to feel like they have to protect either parent. They can come to her with their honest, raw emotions, and she's going to be the safe place. And I think for most of us as parents, that's really, as hard as that is, that's really what we do want. And when we can recognize that, it can become more of a motivator. Then it can be the driver to help us make those tough decisions and stay high road, because we are doing it with the long game in mind, with our kids' health and well-being in mind. And that's truly the right driver.
Right. So you're a mediator. How does that differ, or is it just part and parcel of being a coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am a trained mediator, but I don't have a mediation practice. So it is different than being a coach. Many people might elect to go to a mediator to resolve their divorce case. So a mediator doesn't represent one party or the other. They are truly a neutral. So they will help the couple to figure out a fair and equitable dissolution of the marriage, and how to divide the assets, and do so with some trained skills, right, that they bring to that process. As a coach, I think those skills are very useful, to help people learn where to compromise, and how to see that giving is winning in a lot of senses, right? That winning doesn't necessarily have to look like what you might think it does. It's not a sports game. It's a very different thing, right? Winning has a whole different definition than it does in a traditional environment. So I use my mediation skills as a coach. I really like being trained as a mediator, but I don't play that role, because I usually work with one person or the other in the process, as opposed to working with the couple together. In
Okay, that
some cases, I help a couple to come up with their parenting plan, and that's something that can be really useful. And honestly, it can be a great way for couples who are in this to save money sometimes, because it's cheaper than having the lawyer do it. We come up with a plan, and if they can agree on it, then they take it to the lawyers for the blessing of, legal blessing, and to be written up and filed. But that's really an exception. For the most part, I'm working with one party or the other.
Okay, that was going to be my next question because you were using the
Yeah,
word they, and I'm thinking, is that a like a
right.
non-gendered word, or do you actually see both people? Now, if it's as amicable as possible, is it good for you to see both of them and have them there and like discuss all this stuff, or is it just
It
easier to
can
work with?
be.
Okay.
It can be. I don't typically work with both parties, and I'll tell you why, Agnes, is most people don't know what they don't know, and what they figure out once they get into it, they come and they and say they want to be very amicable and that they, need help here and here, but it can very quickly devolve into like a couples therapy, and that's not
Mm,
my role. So I don't want to not meet their needs, and I don't want to, create false expectations around what we can get out of that. So my coaching is normally limited to working with one party or the other, to help them navigate through it. The majority of my clients are women, but I do also work with
okay. Now, you must have cases where the acrimony is so intense
men.
that
Yeah, I do.
middle ground seems almost impossible.
Yeah, I do. And that then presents a different set of challenges, right? Then you're looking at, okay, how do we define healthy communication? What does co-parenting look like in a situation where you can barely be in the same room? How do you share information with each other? How do you do what's best for the kids in that situation? When we're talking about boomers, right? A lot of the kids are adults now,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So they're probably out of the home. Maybe they even have their own kids. But some of the same situations come up. They may come home for the holidays and they don't necessarily want to have to go to two different houses, but maybe that's what has to happen, right? Or they have to divide time in half. So part of what I work with parents who are of this, boomer generation who are really trying to navigate this, what this new normal is in a situation where there is a lot of conflict and there's a lot of anger, is how to manage that, what you do say to people that is appropriate, what you don't share, and what are healthy outlets for that. Then how can you manage this new normal in your life and get through the process yourself, get through maybe the grief, the anger, the frustration, whatever emotions are coming to the top for you, handle the triggers, and set yourself up to be as healthy as possible going forward.
So if one person actually decides that they are going to be a royal pain in the ass, period, is that when mediators and lawyers get involved?
You know, it's a great question. People sometimes want to do this without lawyers, right? And a lot of, actually, nationwide, the majority of people in the U.S. file for divorce without a lawyer. It's called pro se, on their own.
Oh, okay.
Now, I will tell you that if you have any amount of assets, and after a certain number of years, if you're in that gray divorce area, you probably do have, a lot of combined assets. Your life has been intertwined for many
Yeah,
years
yeah.
in all likelihood, unless this is maybe a second divorce or something. But if that's the case, I recommend at least talking to a lawyer. A lot of lawyers will do what's called an unbundled service, which means that you can go to them hourly just for a couple hours to give you some advice, review an agreement, make sure you haven't missed anything, because there are such significant potential consequences for not doing that. It is well worth that initial investment up front rather than just hope for the best down the road. It's so much easier to fix it up front than to try and undo something later. So I actually find that the lawyers get involved as early as possible, in the best situations, honestly, because it doesn't mean that it has to be a war. It just, lawyers can talk to each other, the party can talk to each other, but at least this way they know that their interests are covered. So, you can have people involved without escalating it and saying we have to go to court. The vast majority of divorces settle, they don't go to court. And I definitely do not advise people going to court. That is no
Yeah,
win for anybody.
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it has to happen, but very infrequently.
Now, I don't know what things are like in the States, but I'm in Canada, and I know like a lot of women my age spent some time as stay-at-home moms when the children were
Mhm.
small. And
Mhm.
so there is a legal process by which you can pension split those
Yeah.
years where you were staying at home.
Yeah.
So a lot of women don't realize that, and to have some sort of person with that knowledge, whether it's your financial advisor
Yes.
or your lawyer or whatever, help sort through that, can make a big difference in the long run.
Huge difference. I think the biggest thing that I would say to women who have been in that situation, who may or may not have a full picture of their family's finances,
Yeah.
also where everything is, right? Where accounts are, how many accounts you have, what the balances are, what's your life insurance and your pension situation, like you said, what do your investments look like? There are people who are specifically trained in divorce to help with finances. Here in the United States, they're called certified divorce financial analysts,
Okay.
but also just financial planners are a good place to start if that that particular subset of people isn't available to you. But they are absolutely worth your time because there are also tax consequences for how you split things up. And going into that with your eyes open about what your liabilities are going to be, what your benefits are going to be. And if you've been in a marriage for, like you said, decades, a very long time, then the formulas don't always apply. The formulas are often created for shorter marriages with lower incomes. So if you find yourself in a higher asset and longer lasting divorce, it's so worth the time to talk to a lawyer about what your rights are and a financial person to really understand the landscape so that you can make the best possible decision for yourself. I mean, I just always say education is always worth the effort, right? To get educated about the laws where you are, get educated about the rules so that you really have a sense of what is fair, what you can ask for, what you should expect. Don't necessarily just take somebody's word for it who's been through it however many years ago, because your situation might not be the same.
I can remember when I went and I can't remember why the lawyer was involved, but I went to see my lawyer, and she looked at me and she said, "If you're going to walk with nothing, I'm not your lawyer. If you're going to try to gouge him out of everything, I'm not your lawyer. But if you're willing to figure this out equitably, let's go for it." And then my financial
Yeah.
advisor, as soon as all the paperwork was done, she said, "Okay, let's deal with this now and get it into safe places and tax, you know, better tax
Right.
places." Yeah,
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 exactly, right?
yeah.
Everything changes. Everybody's got a different situation. Some people have adult children that need ongoing support, kids who have different needs, maybe grandkids. Who knows? Everybody's got, their own particular issues that they are solving for, right? Maybe you want to move and retire in some other city and buy a place to live. Whatever it is, having those conversations up front so that you identify what your priorities are will help the team that you surround yourself with to get you to that goal. If they don't know what you want, they can't really help you get there. But when you can get clear about what your priorities are, and this is something that a divorce coach can really help with, helping you sort out what those priorities are so that you know where you might be willing to compromise and where you really feel like you need to stand firm, so that both parties can, win, right? In quotes, right? Because it's like we said, it's not the same definition of winning, but you can come out feeling like you did your best and you're going to be okay for the future. That's a good place to be.
Well, and I think too, I'm probably giving out too much personal information here, but I remember being so independent and thinking, I just want to be done. Like, I don't care about the money. And of course, the
Yeah.
lawyer said, yeah, no, actually, because at the time of a divorce, you might have a good job. You might be able to take care of yourself and your portion of the
Yeah.
kids, whatever, but you don't know what the future holds. And to have
Yeah.
The maximum pension allowable coming in helps. If your health changes, like you might be able to get some benefits, all that
Oh,
sort of
for sure.
stuff. You don't know what the future
Yeah.
holds.
Yeah, it can be easy. You hit on something that happens often, which is this like desire to just throw in the towel and say, I don't want to deal with this anymore. So I'm going to say, fine, I'll give up. I don't need to fight for something that I feel like, my lawyer says I could get, or somebody else tells me I could get. And that's a choice. Everybody has that choice. But I really encourage people to make that choice just with eyes wide open. Be sure that what you're walking away from, you're going to be comfortable that you walked away from in 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, because it might not be worth walking away right now. Are there other coping strategies that you could put in place to handle whatever stressors this is bringing up for you, so that you get the benefit of whatever that is and get through this time in a way that you can handle and manage? Because there are generally compromises there that are available.
Yeah. Let's talk adult kids. We touched on that just very briefly because, yeah, by
Yeah.
this age, the kids are usually adults. Do you ever see situations where the kids are determined to be involved? Whether they try to talk the parent out of it, the instigating parent out of it, or take sides or whatever?
Yes, it's interesting. I sometimes think that the adult kids are acting like they're much younger in those situations. You know, th- for whatever reason, adult kids can feel like they have a real stake or a real interest in, an outcome related to this. What is it? And for whatever reason, they might feel like one parent got wronged, that they need to protect a parent, that they need to protect both parents, that they are frustrated for their own life. What's it going to look like when I come home, right? Where am I going to stay? What's this going to, is mom going to need to come live with me or dad? How is this going to work? So, you know, in that situation, I have to remind parents that it's not their job to do this for their kids anymore, that their kids are young adults. They might still be young, but they are, going to
Yeah.
be able to bounce back. They're resilient. They're going to be okay. It might not be anybody's first choice, but that's not enough of a reason, in my opinion, to stay in something that isn't serving you any longer. So if you've made the choice to divorce, but your kids are pushing back, that can be really challenging because no one wants to disappoint their kids. We all want to, do the best for them. And that can be a very frustrating situation. One of the things I work with clients on a lot in that situation is messaging, right? Just thinking through, okay, how do I have a vulnerable and honest, and also with some boundaries and some firmness, a conversation that meets all of those things with these kids, so that they understand where I'm coming from, and that hopefully they can they can be supportive and respectful. That, yeah, this might be difficult for all of us, but if the parent has made that decision, then they're going to need to follow it. And it is tricky.
I see it from a different angle insofar as I work with frail elderly. So it's not about the
Mm,
divorce, but I see those adult children who now parent their parents a bit too assertively, shall we say, to the
sure.
point of almost being bossy. And
Hmm.
it's just like, Sorry, I'm the parent here. I'm an adult. I can take care of myself." I
And
mean,
I'm still
asking
capable
for
of,
help.
right, making those
Yeah,
decisions.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so putting your foot down in the case of a child in the divorce picture, an adult
Yeah.
child who says, "I know best," or thinks they know best, and, well, actually,
Right.
no, you're not living in my shoes. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And it is hard. And I do understand very much that it's a new reality for everybody involved,
Mhm.
and it takes getting used to. And when everybody can look at it like that, look, we're all going to have to sort of brave this
Yeah.
together, right? It's going to take some work. It's going to take an open mind. It's going to take a little bit of patience, but we can do it. if we all set the intention, and this is where I really do love setting these goals, right? If the parent can share their goals with the kids and say, look, this is what I'm hoping for during this process. This is where I want to come out on the other side. This is why I'm doing this. This is what's important to me. Sometimes that can be a really nice way to bridge that disconnect between the parents and the kids, to help them get engaged with the current situation and see, okay, my parent has thought through this. They really see that there's an end in sight
Right.
and a light at the end, if you will, and that they'll get there. And that, what will the resistance cost me, right? What will it cost in terms of the relationship and the effort and the angst and the stress? Is it going to be healthy for me? Is it going to be healthy for the parent? It's a question they have to ask, right?
Is there ever a time? No, this is a joke. But I was going to say, is there ever a time where the parent just sort of says, "Look, let us get through this, and I'll buy you a series of counseling sessions for Christmas."
Hey, I love that. Sometimes that might be a great approach. Leave it to the professionals, right?
Yeah,
Let somebody else, help you walk down that road. I
yeah.
think that's a good idea. Actually, I might use that one.
Oh, okay, good.
I
No,
like it. Yeah.
friends also. Because so
Oh,
so often, if you've been married for decades, that you've had the same friends for decades,
yeah.
they either feel pressured to take one side or the other, or they disconnect
Yeah.
completely. What do you
Yeah.
see?
I see that happening all the time, right? And especially in gray divorce, when, to your
Yeah,
point, people have established relationships over so many years, it can be very challenging for the friends to figure out,
yeah,
how do we manage this new reality? What do
yeah,
we
yeah,
do here? So I actually, it's interesting that you say this, but my background is in communications, and I believe that the way that we talk about these things is one of our greatest tools in the divorce process. The way that we really think through how we're talking to the people in our lives about this situation can make or break it. And, you know, it's very common that one spouse or the other feels slighted when friends, and they might just not know what to do, right? So, to the extent possible, if the couple is able to tell their friends together and say, you don't have to pick a side. We're not going to be upset if, you go out with one of us or not the other. And sometimes things sort of fall naturally. But if the couple can give friends permission to be friends with both, that's a great starting point if they're able to do that. When they start, when the couple starts putting friends in the middle is when things start to get tricky. Then they're going to feel like, I don't want to be part of this dynamic. I didn't sign up for this. I care about both of you. This doesn't feel good to me. So I advise against trying to recruit people on one
yeah,
side or the other, because everybody needs a support system, and you know who your key support people are. Maybe it's a very dear friend or a family member, hopefully also at least a professional like a coach or a lawyer, but also not trying to get your friends to just be the one to run interference all the time, because that generally backfires.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I see what you mean with the messaging. It's almost better to say very little, except this is what's happened, and
Well, and
just
writing out, like, this is something I do with clients a lot, but helping them to think about who their circles of contacts are. Like, there's that innermost circle, maybe your closest friends and family, depending on the ages and your
yeah,
kids in there. Then there's that, one circle out, which is good friends, colleagues, maybe people that you need to share information with, and probably in person, but, may or maybe not in person always. Then there's that outer circle, like people you're going to run into at a grocery store that's going to, say, or that you haven't talked to in a long time. But when you do, when you go, oh my gosh, I have to send them a holiday card, how am I going to do that? Right. I like to think about how you message each of those groups. And I actually have sample scripts on my website to help people with this, because I run into this a lot, right? Because how do you differ your messages from one of those groups to the other? And what do you ask for? A lot of people will say, you want to be prepared for those inevitable questions. Oh, what happened? Oh, you always seem so happy, right? What, you know what people are going to say. So when you can get yourself more prepared to handle those questions, then you don't have to feel so insecure about being out, running into people. When you have those, I call them some, messages or power statements, even in your back pocket, to remind you of your strengths and remind you why you're doing what you're doing, so that you can feel like if someone asks you something that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, you have a decent answer. You can respond. And it can be with kindness. It should be, I would hope, with some, love and kindness, but also some boundaries where you talk about what you're prioritizing, so that you can move forward, say your piece, and feel like you're still the one in control of your situation. I don't know if that's helpful.
I'm going to share one more story because it's
Yeah, sure.
hilarious. Is when I was in university, I was maybe 22, 23, met a man and we were talking marriage. And so, of course, all the Christmas cards went out from the two of us and stuff like that. And my cousin, that I don't know well, would send a card back to the two of us. That was lovely. 7 years later, I'm married to a different man, and the cards are still coming to the first guy's name, and for I think all of our marriage.
Oh,
And
really? The
it,
whole
but yeah,
time?
and I'd signed from like the husband's name, and my cousin would just send the card to the old guy's name, and it was
Oh
just
my
like
gosh, that's
partly it
so
was partly
funny.
embarrassing, but it also became a joke.
Right.
I'm not sure my former husband thought it was that big of a joke, but
Yeah.
it was just
Right.
to
And
say,
always,
yeah, all those
people have
years
different
later.
perspectives on that kind of a joke, right?
Yeah, yeah. But oh dear. Now, just I'm going left here. Statistics seem to suggest that women still come out on the downside of the financial story,
Mm.
like over the long
I
term.
think, yeah, I think that's often because, well, a couple of reasons. One is that, women generally get paid less, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
their future earnings and current earnings are going to
yeah.
be probably a little bit lower. So
Hmm.
that's one factor. The other is the, other issue that you mentioned, that a lot of women, especially of the boomer age, stayed home for a period of time with kids.
Right.
So they may or may not have, climbed the ladder in their career the way they would have if they had stayed in the
Yeah.
career the whole time. So, um, you know, it depends. Obviously, there are more and more women who are breadwinners in their family
Yeah.
these days, which is awesome. And there are a lot of women who still come out, you know, trying to get to an equitable division of assets, especially in a gray divorce. And I do see that fairly regularly. Here in Colorado, where I am, Colorado is a no fault state, meaning that, nothing that either party did to cause the dissolution of the marriage matters. And that in that this case is helpful, because if one or the other had an affair, or decided they just wanted to leave or move to another state, none of that matters in the dissolution. And the
Right.
judges here, in Colorado, and I'm being specific just because I know this one
Mhm.
the best, but
Yeah.
um, will work to give as much equity as possible, in the situation. They want it to be as even as they can. So that depends, though. There are other states that that don't see it the same way. So yes, that can happen, and it varies a lot depending on where you are. Which is why, again, I go back to that: get educated about the laws
Mhm.
wherever you are, whether it's Canada, whether it's a state here in the United States. Just be aware that different states, different countries have different regulations about how assets are divided. And it's really smart to know about that. At least, I'm not saying, to do it all yourself, but just get a little bit of education so that you know what questions to ask,
Right.
to get the professional support that you need.
Yeah, one of the articles that I read did say exactly what you said right off the top, is that because a man will often, especially in our generation, my generation, earn more and willing those earnings still increase. So if you're divorced at 50, 55, even 60, he may be working for another 10 years and may end up
Yeah,
earning like another 100,000 more than he was earning at the
yeah,
time of the divorce. So,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, those are important considerations. You're not necessarily entitled to future
yeah,
earnings post divorce, but it's a factor in what the whole financial picture looks like. So
yeah.
again, it's just, what are the tax consequences? Maybe there are trade-offs that, either of you might be willing to make given that reality if one spouse is going to stay in the job force longer than the other. So yeah, it's those are important questions to ask for sure. And all the more reason why it pays to get educated and have the right professionals around you for your situation.
Yeah, I think those professionals have got to be just a godsend insofar as you know all those ins and outs that those of us just sort of thinking, oh, I want to be out of this marriage. Unless you got a track record of divorces, you probably don't
Exactly.
know,
You
you
don't
know.
know. And
Yeah,
and you're emotionally depleted.
yeah,
I always say it's this really brutal irony that we need to be at our decision making best despite feeling our emotional worst. We're exhausted, we're overwhelmed, a lot of times grieving. Even if the even if you initiated it, it doesn't mean you're not grieving the loss, right?
yeah,
Even if you started the whole thing, it doesn't mean it's not difficult. So it's okay that you're still grieving, even if you were the instigator. That those two things still can be true at the same
yeah,
time.
right.
So recognizing that this is an overwhelming and exhausting process by any standard. No one would expect you to do it by yourself. You shouldn't have to do it alone. There really are wonderful resources available, and they are worth it because your health and well-being matters, and you can't make good decisions, figure out where to compromise, take care of other people, take care of yourself when you're completely depleted.
And how often do you see that a person comes in and they've got the friend who says, I know somebody who got this, this, and this. You've got
Oh,
to do that. You've got to do the other thing. And
all
it's
the
just like,
time.
yeah, yeah, just
I
okay.
call that angry Aunt Marge. And angry Aunt Marge is not your best friend in divorce.
Yeah,
Um, you know, she's bringing her divorce baggage to your situation. Her situation may or may not apply to yours at all. There
yeah.
may not be overlaps. It The things that she is suggesting may throw gasoline on a fire. You don't want that. You want to reduce conflict and slow down the angst and the frustration in order to create something that you come out with that's your best case scenario. you
Yeah.
know and that's not because the other person deserves it. That's because it's in your best interest to do that, financially and emotionally and in every way. When you can minimize the length of the process, reduce the conflict, that is in your best interest.
So what you're saying is we can't take the high road with angry Aunt Marge hanging onto our ankles.
Yes, yes, thank you. You summed it up perfectly.
There we go. Now you
That's
talk about
exactly
it.
it.
You talk about a collaborative approach. Is that what we've just been talking about for the last while?
Well, yes and no. So there's a collaborative approach is what we were talking about, but there's also a legal designation for divorce here in the U.S. called collaborative law, and that is a uniquely creative and open process, a little different than a process that could end in court, because while each side still retains lawyers, they both are collaboratively trained, and they all parties sign an agreement that if they are not able to come to settlement, they will have to get rid of those attorneys and start all over. So
Okay.
there is a real incentive to settle outside of court, and it allows for a lot more creativity. So, for example, if you were doing a parenting plan, you could say, let's try this for 3 or 4 weeks and see how the kids respond. And then we can try again if it's not working very well. In traditional process, that doesn't happen very often unless the parents are very amicable. So this allows the framework for a more amicable solution with the boundaries and the setups and the support. Even if it's not the most amicable, but you both agree you don't want to go to court, it allows for a lot of creativity. There's typically a financial person involved. If there are kids, which most often the collaborative process is involving kids, but not always. But if there are kids involved, there's usually a parenting person or a coach like me who is a facilitator or a neutral to help guide the process, sort of quarterback it through from day one to the end. So that we call that big C, official C. And then there is the little c, which is more like what we have been talking about, which is just, that approach that you take, not such a formal process, but just the approach that you take. And, for people who want to minimize conflict, I go back to that goal setting. Knowing that up front is very important. Communicating that to the attorneys that you might meet with to say, I don't want a high conflict divorce, because who you choose matters. There are attorneys who are litigators. That's what they do. That's what they want to do. That's where they specialize. If you hire someone like that, you can expect that it will more likely go that direction. If you hire someone who is more focused on settling, who is a more collaboratively minded person, that's more the approach you're going to get. So it's important to ask those kinds of questions so that you know who you're bringing onto your team, depending on what your goals are. And depending on, who you're dealing with with your ex, with your spouse, those are important things to consider as you make decisions.
Now, you said that to get a lawyer who's trained in the collaborative approach,
Yep.
how do you know? Do you just ask, or is there a designation that they usually
Yeah,
advertise?
there is. If you search collaboratively trained lawyers in your
Oh,
state,
okay.
your location, there are directories of that. Here in Colorado, there is a website with all of us who are collaboratively trained lawyers, financial professionals, coaches, mediators, who are all focused on collaboratively trained divorces, finalizing collaborative divorces. And I've gone through all that training as well, and I think it's really a great option for people. It's worth considering because it just gives you a lot of flexibility. It really allows for you to be creative around what works for your unique family.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah, good, really good to know.
Yeah.
You wrote an article called January, the month of divorce and reinvention. Is January really part of the resolution, new start, divorce picture? I mean,
Isn't
it
it
was sort of,
crazy? It's informally called Divorce Month, January, because what ends up happening is that families don't want to deal with this over the holidays, which
okay.
is understandable. They want to give their kids, that last season together, whatever that looks like for them. And then they're like, come January, we're done. Or in some cases, they get through the holidays and go, we can't do this another year. um, but, it surprisingly really is there is a noticeable increase in the number of filings in January, February. It's kind of shocking, but it is true.
Yeah, yeah. When I read that, I went, "Really?"
I
So,
know, I know.
oh dear,
Yes, it's true. It
all
is.
those January brides or all those June brides are January divorcees.
It could be. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you say the number one question you hear is, "What did I do wrong in my marriage to find myself here?"
Mm.
How do you answer that?
Isn't that interesting? It's not the question that I really would have thought would be the number
Yeah,
one
yeah.
question, but everybody feels this sense of failure for the most part. I should have done something different. How did I get here? Why am I in this situation? Um, and for me, the answer is so individual for each situation. But I don't think of it always as a failure at all, actually. I think if you have the energy and the vulnerability and the courage to say this isn't serving me anymore, or it's harming me in a worst case scenario, that you're brave enough to say I'm going to do something about it. I don't think you can fault yourself all the for the choices that you made when you knew as much as you did. You did the best you could. As Maya Angelou said, right? We do the best we can until we know better, and then we do better. You do better when you know better. And in my experience, part of the biggest challenge of this process is forgiving yourself for whatever it was that got you here. I know that was a challenge for me. I mean, I got divorced after 20 years of marriage, and I felt like, oh, I should have seen these things or done something different, right? I had teenage twins at the time. But today I really look at that differently. I look at that all as I did do the best I could at the time. I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. And I truly believe now, I'm grateful now for every single step of that, because everything I learned brought me to today. Every single thing I did brought me to today. And I have such a relationship that I cherish with both of my kids, and I'm so grateful for it. I'm a better friend. I'm a better professional. I'm a better partner than I ever would have been had I not gone through those things. So I today feel a ton of gratitude, honestly, for everything that brought me to this point. And I think that that's what I hope I can share with people who find themselves in that situation. You might not see it today, and it is a painful part of the process to look back. But I also see it as the opportunity, because if you can go back and honestly assess, where could I have been better? What could I have done to change this dynamic? And how can I do that going forward so that I don't find myself in this situation again? How can I be the best parent, friend, partner, sibling, daughter, all the things, right?
Yeah.
With learning from this, then you didn't do anything wrong. You gained far more out of it. And I hope that people can grow to have that perspective.
Regular listeners may be tired of hearing this anecdote, but I had a friend many years ago who said that a bad decision was still the best available data.
I love that.
So
I
given
love
what you
that.
know in the moment, you
Yes,
make a decision. Up the road,
that's
is
right.
it the right? Maybe not. But at that point in time, yeah, given the information, the data that you had, yeah, yeah,
That's right. None of us have a crystal ball. None of us do. We do the best we can with the information that we're presented with. And when we know better, we do better.
there we go. What haven't we talked about that you want mid-age women to think about if they find themselves knowing that divorce is in the near future or they've just started the process?
I think one of the best takeaways people can have is to be kinder to themselves than they think they need to be as they go through this process. It is challenging, it is overwhelming, it is very difficult. But try to talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend who was going through it. What would you say to her if you found that she was in this situation? I'm guessing it wouldn't be get your lazy butt up out of bed and do more today. What would you say to her? You deserve to take a break. How can I help you? What can I do to support you? And try to do that for yourself. So I think that's a huge thing. And go hand in hand with that is to go get some support. No one should have to do this by themselves. We don't know what this looks like, and there are great resources out there. So support is so critical. Kindness to yourself is so critical. And just um, you know setting some goals, really thinking through, what do I want my life to look like down the road? It'll help you to really clarify what steps are most important and what you need to do to move forward. And so I love that. And I have a workbook on my website that's free. Anybody can download it anytime, has the templates to set those goals, think through that. And I really think that that process can be very eye-opening for people, because my goal is to help them put the confidence back in their court, feel good, as as good as they possibly can as they embark on this journey, because it is stressful. So gather the tools, gather the support, and go in sort of fortified and as confident and strong as you can.
And where do we find you on the World Wide Web?
So my website is betterthanbeforedivorce.com. And my everything is on there, and I certainly welcome anybody to download those free resources or sign up for my newsletter, where I send it all out weekly. So I'm very happy to be a resource for anybody who would like that.
Okay, that was my next little note here. Then a person can sign up for your Divorces a Shit Sandwich newsletter.
Yes,
And is
they
that good
can.
reading for like every age group? Okay.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I do all kinds of different issues. So each week is a blog post, and that can be on all kinds of different divorce topics. I cover pretty much everything. And then I do also a question. I answer a question from a reader, and there's a place to submit them if someone has them and wants me to answer it. And then I also offer a resource every week. So those are the three parts of the newsletter. And then there's a lot more on the website too, but if you're subscribed to the newsletter, that's what comes every week.
Okay. Before we close, may I ask a personal question?
Of course.
I'm going out on a limb here because I like to do research on the people I interview. And if you don't answer the first question right, I'm hooped. Do you have a favorite child?
Yes, my furry
Okay, well, no, there you go.
That's
You were
my
supposed to say,
favorite.
oh, absolutely not. And I was going to ask why, if you have two furry children, you have two furry children, don't you?
I do.
Why is there only one on your website?
Okay, that's a really fair question, because, and it's actually related to divorce, believe it or not. But my dog, the one that's on my
Okay.
website, Ozzy, is my divorce dog. And now, fast forward, I'm in a blended family and a blended dog family.
Oh,
So my other
okay.
dog is my
Your
bonus
stepdog.
dog, but he's my stepdog. But the one that you saw
Okay.
on my website is my divorce dog. He's my furry baby. So yes, you're correct.
Okay. You just redeemed yourself. I'm thinking if she's
Oh,
got two
phew.
of them, like why? I mean, as cute as anything. She? Cute as anything.
It's a
He's cute
he.
as anything.
The other one is just as cute, and it's really kind of unfair to him, and his feelings probably would be hurt if he knew. So I probably should add
Well,
him.
just don't let
Yes.
him listen to the podcast, and then you'll never know.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and I always say he's a little Havanese, and I always say that what he lacks in brain power, he makes up in cuteness. But he's not the smartest one in the bunch, so he might miss it
Okay,
anyway.
there you go. You're also on social, I think, aren't you? You're all over social?
I am. I'm on all the
Yeah,
channels: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn,
all
TikTok.
that stuff.
I have a
Yeah.
YouTube. Yeah, so
Okay, that's great.
I hope people will visit that if it's of help. I'd love to have them.
Okay. Your website link is in the show notes, and all of the links are on your
Awesome.
page at our website, so you'll have your own page. Listeners, if you have thoughts on
Wonderful.
today's show, please talk to us. If you're listening at Boom with a Bang, you just scroll to the bottom of the page, talk to us there. Maybe there was a question I didn't ask Andra. Ask it in the comments and I'll get you an answer. And this is something I rarely say, but I'm going to say it on this podcast. This is one of those times that it's okay to use a pseudonym if you really need an answer, but also really need to keep your identity under wraps. And needless to say, if you message us or comment on the website, your email address never shows. So just keep that in mind if there was something I didn't ask.
Good info.
Share this episode. The increasing frequency of gray divorce is no secret. When my former husband and I split, everyone in our world was surprised. No one saw it coming. Perhaps a friend of yours is in the same boat and needs a place to start. This conversation might help answer some questions they have, especially if they sign up for the shit sandwich. I mean, I'm sorry, I just love that title.
It gets a lot of good response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave stars and reviews where you can. The algorithm goddesses love them. Andra Davidson, thank you for being my guest today and sharing vital information. I mean, this is past important. It's vital information about what can be a stressful, emotional, even a scary time.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your willingness to ask such important and vulnerable questions, and I hope it's valuable for your
It was
listeners.
great. Yeah, appreciate it. Have a great rest of week.